It may not be so well known. This Erev Shabbos, Parshas Chukas, is unique. Brought down in the Rishonim. Its uniqueness is that the Ma'ora, as we'll soon see, is focused to the day in the week, as opposed to usually any Yom Tainis or anything that has to do, a Yom Tov, a Tainis is always the day in the month. The Rishonim, the Shabali Aleket, the Sefer Atanya from the Rishonim brings the Shabali Aleket, and the Magen Avram, in the end of Siman Tov Kuf Pei, quotes the Sefer Atanya, that Vav Chukas, today, Erev Shabbos Kodesh Parshas Chukas, is a time for Tainis Yechidim. It's a Yom Tainis. Why? What happened on Vav Chukas? At the time of the earlier Rishonim, Rabbi Yechiel Mipariz had a yeshiva, a famous yeshiva in Paris. He had many Talmidim. The Marami Rutenberg was one of his Talmidim. He had a Talmud that Rahman al-Islam converted to Christianity. And obviously made tsaros. And one of the things he thought, that if he'll be able to remove the Gemara from Klal Yisrael, the Sifri Halacha, he'll be able to accomplish that Klal Yisrael, Rahman al-Islam, should also convert just like he did. So he went to the king and he made up a story and he said that the Svarim are against you, against Christianity. A whole arichas, and there was vikuchem. L'maisa, they made a gzeira to burn the Svarim. And in the year 5004, 1244, close to 800 years ago, Friday, Erev Shabbos Parshas Chukas, they burnt 20 wagons of Svarim. The Magen Avram brings it, he says 20 Svarim. If you look in the Shabali Aleket, he says Kid Chof Daled, 24 wagons. Even one Sefer is Rahman al-Islam, but we have to understand that in those days, it wasn't like what we have Baruch Hashem today, Chazdei Hashem, so many Svarim. Every person has a Shas, a Shulchan Aruch, other Svarim. Those days, it was before the printing press, Bechlal, and anyone that had a Sefer is because it was handwritten. So just imagine having a Shas, the whole Shas was handwritten. And the Gzeira, it was a Gzeira that happened, Vav Chukas, to burn the Svarim. The Svarim got burnt then. So Mamela, Noagu HaYechidim Lesanos. It's not a Tainus Tzibur, but Yechidim fast on Vav Chukas. One of the Rishonim, the Taka was in that Kufa, Reb Chaim Paltiel, writes that it's a Tainus Shenoagu B'Tzarfas. That's Taka where it happened, in France, in Paris, in France. That's where the Tainus is. To add some background to why this happened, the Sreifa of the burning of 24 wagons of Svarim, it's important to mention the story that's brought by a Talmud of Rabbi Nachum, Reb Hillel Vorne, and he writes the following. He says that there's a gewaldige machloikis. There were those that were chaylik on the Rambam, two of his Svarim. The Rambam wrote Moreh Nevuchim and the Sefer Amada. And they held that how the Rambam goes through very clearly to understand that Emunah is not the right approach. People are going to learn it, they're not going to understand, they're only going to have the questions, they're not going to understand the answers. A person is supposed to go with the Emunah Pshuta. Not like how the Rambam explains, Moreh Nevuchim, you have to understand, it's not an easy sefer to learn, and it shouldn't have been written. There's a big machlekes, his Rabbi Nachum, together with Reb Shlomo ben Avram ben Ahar, amongst others from the Rishonim, were those that argued on the Rambam. Ad kedei kach, we don't understand, there's a machlekes l'shem shemayim, but ad kedei kach, they burnt the svarim of the Rambam, these svarim, they burnt it, and as it's brought, it was in the same square in Paris, over there in France, the same place as later on came this sreifa of the Talmud Vav Chukas. One place says that it happened 9 or 10 years later, and another place, the way they bring it is that it was 40 days later, and Nis'ariv Ofar Ba'ofar, the ashes of the Rambam Svarim was mixed with the ashes of the Svarim of the Talmud and the Sifri Allah of the 24 wagons. And as continues on the Talmud of Rabbi Nachum, and he says that Rabbi Nachum saw from this a simim min hashamayim, that he made a mistake, and Rabbi Nachum announced publicly that he made a mistake. He made a mistake by this, that he was arguing on the Rambam for writing these svarim. And on top of that, Rabbi Nachum decided that the right thing to do is to take a trip from Europe to Eretz Yisrael. Not like today, you just hop onto a plane. To take that trip, which is months, if not even longer, to go to Eretz Yisrael, to the kever of the Rambam in Tveria, bring a minion to the kever and ask Mechila. And that's taka what he did. He set out on a trip to head to Eretz Yisrael. Wherever he stopped, in whatever town, and he used to give drashas, he spoke about, gave halacha shiurim to teach the town halachas. He mentioned, he quoted the Rambam's halachas. He always was quoting the Rambam. It's brought that he got stuck in Barcelona in Spain for 3 years. They detained him over there, and then he continued on. And then when he got to Toledo, also in Spain, so over there, they asked him to stay a little, but he machazik to Kehila, and Lamaisa, he was nifter over there, and Lamaisa didn't make it. But Al Kaponim, that's what happened prior to the Sreifas HaTalmud, and Rabbi Nachum took it that this is a simim min hashamayim on the covet of the Rambam, of the Sifri HaRambam. Back to the story of Vav Chukas. Today, Vav Chukas, what happened, the Sreifas of the Svarim 24 wagons, Kina Mem Aleph, on Tisha B'Av, written by the Marami Rutenberg. It's brought that the Marami Rutenberg that we mentioned before was a Talmud of Rabbi Chil Paris. At the time of that Maisa, the Marami Rutenberg was actually present b'shas the Sreifas HaTalmud, and the Marami Rutenberg wrote this Kina Mem Aleph, Shali Srufa Be'esh, which is referring to the 24 wagons of Svarim that was burnt Vav Chukas. A little more in that Kina, Tsuri Balapid Vo'esh, Halabavur ze nasonech ki bachrisech teslat eish b'shulayich. In other words, the Kina says, we got the Torah, Matan Torah was be'eish. So the Kina says that you give the Torah be'eish, to take it away be'eish, the Sreifas HaTalmud of Vav Chukas. Just on the note of this Kina, we should be zoicha that we don't have to say it, and Tisha B'Av should be Ikri Moed, it should be a Yom Tov. But just on the note of this Kina Mem Aleph that's brought that the Marami Rutenberg wrote it, referring to what happened Vav Chukas today, 780 years ago. There are those that actually are choylek and say that the Marami Rutenberg didn't write it, and it's not referring to the Sreifas HaTalmud of Vav Chukas. Many questions we're not going to go in right now, just because it's not. We're not elaborating on the kina. But if you take a look, it speaks about b'chodesh hashlishi sivon b'chodesh haravi. So one of the shaylas asked, what are we talking about in the kina b'chodesh hashlishi? B'chodesh hashlishi was a happy month, a month that we got the Torah. However, for that they're miyashiv, that it's saying that b'chodesh hashlishi we got the Torah. U'b'chodesh haravi Tammuz vav chukas. This now we're in Tammuz is when the Torah was taken away. Lamaisa, there are those, and we'll see that the Yavitz refers to that. There are those that say that it's not referring to the Maisa of today of Vav Chukas, but actually the story that happened 200 years prior in the times of Rashi, the times of the Crusaders, that they also burnt Shuls and Svarim, and that's what it's referring to. And that story actually happened on Shavuos, b'chodesh hashlishi, as quoted as b'chodesh hashlishi. And b'chodesh hashlishi is boy bayoim on Shavuos was the Shuls and Svarim were burnt. And what's b'chodesh haravi? B'chodesh haravi can't be talking about Vav Chukas. That was actually 200 years later, afterwards. That's referring to the Shvius Aluchos. I'll call upon him as the Yavitz in his Siddur in the back. He wrote Hagoyis on his Siddur, and the Yavitz says the following: B'yoyim hazeh, talking about his Hagoyis is going on which pages? It's going on Shavuos. B'yoyim hazeh on Shavuos, Kitchu Shem Shemayim Kahal Hila Kadosha Kalina Cologne. That's in France. Uboy B'yoyim Sorfu Ha'ovim Kol Moyadei Keil, all the Shuls Be'eretz Ashkenaz. Kamosha Kosev Rabbeinu Meir Shliach Tzibur Bekina Sheyasad Al Seifas HaTorah. So, as he says, maybe it said Maram, so they thought it's Maram Mirutenberg, but he says it's really Rabbeinu Meir Shliach Tzibur, which we know is the Rabbeinu Meir that wrote the Akdamas. I'll call upon him back to the opening that we spoke about. Today, Vav Chukas is a tainus Yechidim. The question is twofold. The question is, why is it plugged into Vav Chukas? L'chayr, it should be the day of the month. Whatever day of the month it happened. Anything, Asara B'Tevis is what happened Asara B'Tevis. It doesn't make a difference what day of the month. What day of the week, I'm sorry. So why over here do we go with the day of the week? And on top of that, L'tchatchila, we do not fast on a Friday. We spoke about this already a few times, that if there's a tainus that's nitcha, or now we moved tainus Esther that was Shabbos, once we move it, we didn't move it to Friday, we moved it to Thursday, and if a tainus falls out, we don't move a tainus to a Friday. If it falls out, Asar B'Tevis falls out on a Friday, it fell out last year, and we should be zoich, it shouldn't, but in the calendar it falls out this coming year again Friday, you fast. But at Chatchil we don't fast Friday. So first of all, why were they kaiveya a tainus yechidim on Vav Chukas, not at the day of the month? V'oid, it's actually a Friday. So for this, how the Magen Avram brings it, b'shas the gzeira, they made a shaylas cholam to ask about everything that happens is min hashamayim, but they wanted to know if this is something that it's a gzeira me'es haboyer yisbarach shemai, meaning to say is it something that the goyim did, or this is something a particular gzeira? And the tshuva was this week's parsha zois chukas haTorah, and the targum teaches do gzeira seraisa, mamash exactly this, that it's a gzeira min hashamayim that the 24 wagons should get burned. Do gzeira seraisa. It's not fully answered l'cha'ira why dafka they put it on Friday and why did they put it on the day of the week. It's interesting if you take a look in the Shaboli Aleket. The Shaboli Aleket, it's interesting, it says in the parsha of Chukas, he says Parshas Vizois Chukas HaTorah. It's interessant. Look in the pasuk. It says Zois Chukas HaTorah, not Vizois. And then he says, and then in the Targum, V'hoishivu lahem v'dog zeres eraisa. If you look in the Targum Unkelis, Targum Yerushalmi, it doesn't say vida, it says dog zeres eraisa. But zokt Shaboli Aleket from the Rishon, Ipirushay, the vida, the vav, beyond vav, zois chukas HaTorah is a gzeira. So this is already a little closer. It still doesn't say so much why, but dafka, that they would kaveya the tainus yechidim on Friday and connect it to the day, but al kapon, because really it could be, it's just an answer that what happened on vav chukas is gzeirus araisa. In the title of the Shiur, it said Vav Chukas, then and now. So that was then, Vav Chukas 780 years ago, Rachman Litzlan, the wagons of Svarim were burnt. The Magen Avram says that this day continued to be a day of tsaris, as in the years, in the Gzeira of Tachtat, in the times of the Taisus Yamtiv and the Shach, and others, Vav Chukas was a day that two kihilois gedolos, two big kihilois, were destroyed in this day Vav Chukas. And as the Magen Avram says, if you take a look in the Slicha of the Shach, he mentions in the Slicha about these two cities that were destroyed on Vav Chukas. Chaf Sivan, we spoke about it over here in the Kollel Boiker, a shiur for itself, the history of it, and there are those in Klal Yisrael that say Slichas. If you take a look in the Siddur does not bring, in the Slichas of Chaf Sivan, does not bring the Slicha of the Shach. I found that I have it over here, printed these a few Slichas. I wasn't able to find inside where he speaks about it. But Al Kapanim, the Magen Avram says that when the Shach wrote the Slichas of his Slichas of Chaf Sivan, he mentions the two Kehilos that were destroyed today Vav Chukas. And Mamish Bizman Azed, the Me'etzes Gedoyle HaTorah came out with a letter to be Marba and Meschazek B'Tfilah today, due to the Gzeiris also, Sayin Eretz Yisrael, the Gzeiris Agiyas, that the Bachram have to go leave yeshivas, and even in Chutz La'aretz as well also, it's not simple. In the Chadarim system, they came out with a letter to be Meschazek B'Tfilah. Besides it being a tainus yechidim, it's brought. Reb Chaim Kanevsky said that his father, the Stipler, as well as his uncle, the Chazon Ish, even though they didn't fast, but they were careful not to do anything today. Vav Chukas Dvarim Mishum Sakana. It's not brought in Shulchan Aruch, but just to understand, the day is a day, it's a Chamerdig day. Earlier, Reb Chaim Pelagi brings, and he tells us what happened in his days in Izmir. That's where he was, a city in Turkey. He says that Vav Chukas, there were many people. There used to be people that sold in the market, or did business in the market, or went shopping in the market. Vav Chukas, they refrained from going to the market. Seemingly, I think, the way we'll see in a second how he ends off, because of Pnei Sakon of the Goyim over there. And he says they used to, whatever they had to take care of, they took care of Thursday. So whatever they needed to prepare for Shabbos, they took care of day early. And as he ends off, V'Hashem shoymers Amo Yisrael b'chol mokem b'chol zman shloi tu'una shum ra amen kein yiratz. And he says there shouldn't be a sakana shouldn't come. This Vav Chukas, the Maisa, the story that happened that the wagons of Torah were burnt. So the Ramchal explains a limud, a takeaway. Meaning to say is every tainus is not just you fast because it's a sad day. It's a zman for tshuva, it's a zman for eschaskus, it's a zman for tefillah. So the Ramchal explains, and he says, he goes on this Maisa. I took out the parts that I could understand. Part of it is Kabbalah, but the part of Pshat, he says that just like Bezman Beis Hamikdash Hayakayim, in this week's parsha, the Sirefa Sapara, as he refers to that, it's referring to the Shechina, is a kapara for Klal Yisrael. And when one paraduma was done, means it was time for another kapara, and they needed to bring another Sirefa Sapara. What does it mean, a kapara for Klal Yisrael? B'doima, to what it's brought, Rashi and Taisa bring it in Kedushin, that the Eibishter was shofech on the pasuk in Tehillim, the Eibishter was shofech chamasoi al eitzim avan, and burning the Beis Hamikdash, and not chas v'shalom, it shouldn't be on Klal Yisrael. The same is with the Sirefa Sapara. And therefore he explains that it's always coming for a kapara that Klal Yisrael needs, and therefore how does that come into the Sirefa Sapara? Dr. Ramchal, the biggest kapara is limud HaTorah. And says the Ramchal, after the Churban Abayis, that we don't have anymore the Para Aduma to be a kapara, the Torah itself has to be the kapara. And therefore, says the Ramchal, different times when these Kitrugim in Klal Yisrael, the Torah itself, Rahman al-Tzlon, has to get burnt. The times of Rashi, and later in the times, 200 years later, in the times of the Maram Rutenberg. And therefore he says, it's always a time to be mischazik. And he writes there that for him, the Poyel, he created a kollel of people constantly learning. There should always be a hagana for Klal Yisrael. It says like the Ramchal. So even if we're not fasting, it's a tainus yechida, but at least to understand what happened and what the takeaway is. A takeaway for a person to be mischazik b'Torah. Just to conclude, besides, as we said, Avada, the biggest takeaway is to be mischazik b'Torah, but also to understand that a person has to be careful to cover asvarim. When we learn Masechtas Megillah over here in the Kollel Boiker, we learned together. I gave a shiur, a whole shiur covered asvarim. You can refer back to different halachas. Archas Rabbeinu brings a lot of different anhagas of Zehiris and from the Chazon Ish. You can refer back over there. But Al Kaponim, these a lot of different halachas, Zehiris. A chumash is not supposed to put a different sefer on top of a chumash. Many different halachas. A person should try to see to be zar b'kavod asvarim. But on top of that, also, a person should understand and appreciate the matana tova that the Rabbeinu Shalom gave us, that we have so many svarim. Today, let alone that every house has a shas. I don't know if every bar mitzvah bacher, but you have a shas, and a person has a shulchan aruch, and a sefer a Rambam, and other svarim, and Baruch Hashem, a person goes to shul, these many sets of svarim, rishonim, achronim, halachas svarim, tshuvas. We should understand, appreciate, and utilize the opportunity that we have so many svarim, and to be mischazik and learning We should all have a wonderful Shabbos.